This is a billion-dollar referendum. Over 33,000 votes cast, a difference of 5. Some flaws were discovered in the system. Some compensations were made. This was reduced to nothing other than a coin flip. I mean, the results could have been done with a simple coin flip to decide the expenditure of $1 billion by local taxpayers. Now, good morning. Welcome back to Talkin' Racine. And this morning we have our usual. We have Mr. George Myers to my left.
Morning.
Our producer, Mr. Jim Spodek, to my right.
Morning.
And I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen, your host. We're missing somebody this morning. Not somebody from our usual group here in the studio, but we're missing a very, very dear friend who passed last week, and that is Alderman Carrie Glenn. And this is a woman who we all grew to love. Everybody that met her, I think, even if they did not agree with her, at least had respect for her as a human being. She was a steadfast champion for honesty in government, for hard work. I mean, she had a great sense of humor, and she worked hard, and she was always committed to good principles. And I know her family's going to miss her terribly. I think there's going to be an awful lot of happiness shared at her service tomorrow. And the sad thing really is that there'll be no more memories that any of us can create with Carrie. So we're each going to take a minute here and kind of go over what Carrie meant to us personally. George, why don't you say a few words?
I think, one mention here in the Journal Times, a very nice coverage of her on the front page here. You cannot replace a Carrie Glenn. She was truly unique and very ethical, and like you said, Doc, it was someone that you could really respect as an individual. And what was really nice about her that I really liked also was that she was also part of government. And it was just nice to have someone in that position representing us in a position of power. And yet it never went to her head. She never flaunted it. She was always just Carrie Glenn, and she was always just a very marvelous person. And I'll always remember her that way.
A true public servant.
Yes.
She was. One of the things I always remember was courageous. I mean, she would just take on challenges and hit it 100%, 110% she would use. One of the things, I always remember about Carrie, and she would challenge me all the time. What are you getting out of this? That kind of stuff. And of course, I would just have to come up with some answer. But she would challenge me, and I always enjoyed our conversations because you never got away with anything with her. And I always had a lot of fun with her. And I can remember, this is just one of the memories. My last memory of Carrie was I was in a bar and I was talking to the bartender, and we were having a meeting. It was actually at a hot government meeting, and the door slings open. And here stands Carrie with a Green Bay Packer mug, and she says, "Carrie's in the house." That was her, and she also, like George says, in government, and that was a unique individual, one that could really look at all sides of an issue. You agree or disagree with her, but she was what government really should be, and it was you could talk to her, you could argue with her, you could agree with her, but that's where the community really where she could connect to the community. I think that's something that we're maybe lacking, and we certainly have lost a lot with Carrie. So
I'll tell you another thing that I really appreciated with Carrie. She was always putting these posts on Facebook. Yeah. And it was about her family. I mean, You'd see a picture of her and Charlie out on the Harley, or she and her grandkids, Rooster and Tornado, she called them.
Right.
And it was obvious that she loved her family and just adored those grandkids. And she put these little humorous posts out there, too. She'd, post like a dessert or something, and you get to the end and you find out it was like a total spoof. But she was a real character. And
that is very true. She was just a unique person that just kind of, and I wouldn't say she took over the room, but she certainly was. You knew she was there when she was there.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
There's no wallflower.
Yep. So anyway, the services for Carrie are going to be from 9 to 11 tomorrow morning at Wilson's. Will be the viewing, and then the funeral service to follow that. So if you knew Carrie and you hadn't found out about what had happened there until now, I'm sure the family would appreciate seeing anybody that knew her and loved her coming up and just sharing some memories of her life. So that's it. We're going to move on to another subject now, but boy, that's one that just is not going to be replaced.
It was
That's
stunning.
the school district referendum, the $1 billion referendum. George, we're going to kind of pass it off to you. I'm going to give just sort of a brief rundown of how this thing all came to be. First, there was a $1 billion referendum that Racine Unified School District had on the ballot, and it was declared successful with a difference of 5 votes out of 33,491 cast. 5 votes. The Racine Taxpayers Association, Hot Government, and who was the third?
Libertarian Party.
Libertarian Party?
Yeah.
Represented by Dennis Monte, Jim Sewell, and our own George Myers, filed a petition for a recount. The recount was conducted by the Board of Canvassers of the Racine Unified School District. Because they originated the referendum that was on the ballot, they had the responsibility to manage and oversee the recount. During the course of the recount, several ballots were deemed to have been inappropriately cast and were thus declared invalid. Because the improper ballots were now separated from the envelopes that they came in, and these were all absentee votes, weren't they?
Right. These are all absentee ballots.
They were separated from the envelopes.
The envelopes were kept. The ballots were thrown in with the totally unmarked. There's no connection.
So there was no way to connect them. So
Right.
you couldn't tell what ballot belonged to one of these envelopes that contained invalid information. So a process was created whereby the total collection of ballots for the precincts where errors had been found would be reduced by random selection to reduce the total ballots to the number that were properly cast. There were nearly 100 ballots removed in this process.
Right. Now, what that was, I just want to go into that a little
Hang
bit.
on.
Okay.
I got one more thing to
more
say,
thing.
and
Okay,
I'm going
go
to turn
ahead.
you loose.
Okay, go ahead.
No one other than the RUSD Board of Canvassers were allowed to directly examine the ballots. This was allegedly done to protect everyone from possible coronavirus infection. Now, the bottom line is, after all of these machinations took place and all of these procedures were run their course, so on and so forth, this is a $1 billion referendum. Over 33,000 votes cast, a difference of 5. Some flaws were discovered in the system. Some compensations were made. This was reduced to nothing other than a coin flip. I mean, the results could have been done with a simple coin flip to decide the expenditure of $1 billion by local taxpayers. Now, George, why don't you go in and give some more details on
When I
this?
was halfway through the recount, which lasted about a week, it became very apparent to me that this was no longer a vote to be determined by the will of the voters. It was more by the luck of the draw. And what I want to go through now real quickly is just to explain this appeal is not based on some highfalutin theory about vote counting and whatever. It gets down to actual numbers. And I'm going to use an example of a supposed, let's say, ward where you had 50 yes votes and 50 no votes in this particular ward. Let's say it was 50-50. Now, when it got to the recount point, those things have been checked, double checked, you might even say triple checked. In other words, when they were first cast, they went through a machine and it came out 50 yes votes and 50 no votes. Then they take them for the recount, and they will check every single person that voted in that particular ward, and it came out to 100 people. And then they would count the ballots, and they could count it was 50-50. And I would like to point out at this point of the 15,000 votes, 30,000 votes that were cast,
33,000.
there wasn't a single discrepancy in the machine count. In other words, this 50-50 count went all the various other 50 wards where there were counts were, it came out perfect in every single one where the number of votes cast at the machine. When they first started off the recount, they double checked every single one of those 50 wards, and every single one of them came out right. So we have 50-50 in my hypothetical ward. The only problem is what Doc described is they've looked at the envelopes that they came from and found that one of the envelopes was not right. It was not legal. There was something missing from it. The voter signature, the witness signature, witness address, postmark, something like that was wrong. And so they have to say, okay, out of these 100 ballots here, one of them's wrong, we have to pull one of them out. All right? And the way that, like Doc said, they're going to do it is they're going to do by just drawing one out. All right? So the first thing they have to do now, they're not going to touch any of the walk-in ballots. These are only the absentee ballots because they're the only ones we had trouble with. There was no trouble with the machine count and the people that put things in the machine. It was afterwards when you started looking at the envelopes that it became to be a problem. So at any rate, you have to take these 100 ballots now, and we're going to divide them into two new stacks. One is a walk-in stack of walk-in ballots, and the other is the ballots that were cast by mail. In other words, the absentee ballots. We're not concerned what the count is. We're not concerned with that. All we want to do is we're not going to touch the walk-in ballots. We don't know how many are in these two new stacks, but these are the walk-in ballots, and we're going to draw one ballot out of this stack of absentee ballots. So somebody comes over and kind of blindfoldedly, not actually blindfolded, but they're not looking, and they draw out of the stack. My goodness, it's a yes ballot. All right, so we're going to deduct a yes ballot. Okay, so we know we had 50-50, checked, double-checked, everything's copacetic, so there must be 49 yes votes now and 50 no votes, right? It was 50-50, but now it's one less yes vote. So the no votes have gained one of those 5 ballots, those 5 back. But they say, no, you can't just do arithmetic like that. You can't just subtract 1 from the yes vote and say it's 49-50. We have to recount them again. Okay, so let's do that. So they take these 49 ballots now. There were a bunch over here that were the walk-in ballots, and we combine them with the absentee ballots, and we take and divide them into 2 stacks again. And they divide them into 2 stacks, and then they count them. And when they count them, they say, oh my goodness, look at this. We have 50 yes votes and 49 no votes. We say, how can
How
it
the
be?
hell does that work?
Well, we pulled out a yes vote out of these things and checked and double checked, but now instead of being 49 yes votes and 50 no votes, it's 50 yes votes and 49 no votes, 1 less no votes, and we know we pulled out a yes ballot. How can that be?
How many times did that happen?
About 20 times. 19 times I've said exactly. The point was, that is what our appeal is based on. We have 19 cases like that, which meant 19 additional no votes. In other words, instead of losing by 5 votes, we won by 14. And all we want to do is look at the ballots, not the whole thing. Like saying we're not to say, oh, we're not going to recount the recount. No, we're not. We just want to look at those ballots in those 9 wards.
Okay.
But that's the basis. I understand. That's the basis of our appeal. It's not some, theoretical, hard to understand theory of voting or anything like that. It is on the basis of the simple process of how do you draw out a yes vote and end up with 1 less no vote.
Okay, so it goes to court. Piontek, who is the judge, here's the case from the beginning. Here's the case. Decides that everything looked to be right, and we're just gonna go with the unified and say what they counted was correct. In the court case, in the original circuit court case, he never addresses the rights of the petitioners to count those ballots. He just passes by that, says, well, they never even addresses it, says you can or you can't, but he just lets it go through. And that is part of that appeal, saying all you want to do is in front of a court, in a court situation, is to recount those particular wards that you feel has a discrepancy. And that is really the basis of it. The judge said, nope, can't do it. So what the appeal is doing actually is by going to the state of Wisconsin with it, not only is it Racine, Wisconsin and Unified School District, it's saying to the complete state of Wisconsin, if you have a discrepancy such as what George's went through, you will never have that opportunity to recount or to look or to find out if there was a mistake in that recount, even though it shows up 12, 15 times in this.
In other words, whatever the recounter said, even though it looks, you can see the problems we're facing, even though it comes up with that obvious a problem, you can't look at it.
So this is a
Can't
big
challenge.
appeal. This is a huge appeal, not only for Racine being $1 billion, it's also over the whole state of Wisconsin. And so this is where so when George said, it's not about the school teachers counted the votes and the administration was the ones who determined what ballots would be saw or draw down. It really has nothing to do with that. It's not about anything that is a kind of a fluff around it. The fact is, it's about the actual count. It's about the miscount, and I believe that's really where you're going. There's a miscounting of the ballots and how that was handled.
Well, what
And that's
the appeal is your results don't match the process that you described ongoingly during the recount, because you were a witness every day. I was down there a couple days. You were down there. Several people were down there. But nobody who was part of the appeals process was allowed anywhere near the ballots. I mean, you could look from a little bit of a distance and watch them shuffle through them. But as far as this particular problem that George has just described, that was forbidden. And the state law says that if there's an objection like you guys have filed, you have absolute right and authority to look at those ballots to confirm that the result that was given is the correct result.
Right. And the thing I wanted to point out was that the basis is a very simple arithmetical thing where, just like I described, it happened like 19 times, and we that's the basis of it. And on top of this,
Right.
we throw the other problems of why can't we look at the ballots to
And our
find
appeal
out
basically
how
says,
did you do that? How do you subtract a yes vote and get one less no vote?
all really the appeal is the ballots speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Look at the ballots. If the ballots are correct, I'm sure you'll live with those
Exactly.
results.
Yeah.
But the ballots are the ones that really was really what you want to do.
They're
in
the
a
evidence
court.
that counts.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and that's
And this
that's
is the
important.
appeal right here.
Absolutely.
Now,
It's
is this going to be on the
we're gonna. Yep, it's on Hot Government now, and I'm actually going to post this on Talking Racine. We did get
Okay.
it's 115 pages, but but probably the first 30 pages is really the meat of it. There's an argument and a conclusion that which you could read, if you want to.
I've read some of it, not certainly all of it, but because a lot of it, like you say, is supportive arguments.
Right.
But the basic meat of the appeal I have read, and it's quite interesting. It's quite revealing. I would advise you to get out there and take a look at it.
I realize that sometimes the show gets a little bit into the weeds a little bit with this stuff, but it is $1 billion, and I think to take that time.
That's a lot of weeds.
Yeah, it's a tall weeds. So okay.
So there you go. Like I said, go ahead and check on that. Now,
The mask is back.
the mask is back. Yeah, and we ain't talking about Zorro or the Lone Ranger. We're talking about the...
We're talking about oppression.
the
We're talking
COVID,
about taking away your rights, closing down businesses again, threatening of it. Go ahead, Doc. I didn't mean to get into it.
Yes, you did.
Like, hold it back.
Yeah, the city of Racine has now begun to apparently go out into businesses and look for violations of the mask order and the social distancing order. And they're going to levy fines on people who violate these mandates. Now, you guys go ahead on this one. I think just wear a mask until this thing is over. It's not a big deal. But I completely understand how this is impacting businesses. And there's people that are in grave danger of losing their businesses as a result of trying to comply with this ordinance.
And the one thing I'd like to point out, so it doesn't get lost here, is I can understand Corey Mason and Dottie Bowersox, you're going in and oppressing people's rights. That's typical of people like that. My concern is according to the Journal Times, the Racine Police Department will support the Health Department in carrying out these proactive compliance inspections. And I think, what the hell is happening with Art Howell?
I don't know, I haven't talked to him.
Art, I hope that's a misprint. I hope they're misquoting you.
Social engineering. And when the police are involved in that, that's when you get these police incidents that happen because they're in there with a similar situations like this where you have an argument maybe has to start because I don't believe it. You want to enforce something that I don't believe in, or like a domestic dispute. I mean, those are the ones where these police get into situations. They're not really policing, they're social engineering. I really find that to be a problem. The whole thing is a problem to me.
When you get down to it, if this was a free country, and I am not in any way saying that this is a free country, certainly not a free city. But
I thought he was going to say that it is. That was going to be an argument.
In such a hypothetical existence, the government, the people that were kind of doing all the research on such a thing as this coronavirus, or Chinese virus, whatever you want to call it, would be doing the research on it and making recommendations to the private sector on how it should be dealt with. And then it would be up to the private sector, the people within that community, to make a decision of whether they want to open up their business, and it'll be up to their customers, and it'll be agreement amongst the private sector of how to handle it. The government would not come down and dictate about it. So if it was a free society, that's the way it would be handled. In a totalitarian state, it's the heads of state that decides how everybody's going to act. And that's basically what we have here. They have gone out and gotten this theory about this COVID, this virus, and now they're saying this is our theory, and this is our theory on how you should handle it and how you should behave, and that theory has changed over the course of the 8 or 10 months that we've been dealing with this virus.
Well, there's a better understanding of the virus that evolves.
But the point was, when it started off, the problem was it was going to overwhelm the medical community, and that came from an experience.
Might very well have done it.
Well, that experience came from a place called Italy, where that is actually what happened. Now, as we got and found out that the Italians have a much older society, there's a whole bunch of factors that are coming in, and then of course the lies start coming out about how many people are actually getting contacted from the virus, and it was actually publicly stated at one point in our history with it that if you died with the virus, you might have been in a motorcycle accident or fell off a building or something, but if you died with that virus, it was declared that you died of the virus. And after that had been counted up for many months, they finally had to go back and correct it and reduce by about 90% the number of people that actually died from the virus. So when you enter these politics in with this science, which I've found is strictly a no-no, you start throwing all these lies into it, and you get totally...
Hang on a second.
Well, let me finish, and then you can start telling your side of the story. But when you do that type of thing, you get all kinds of bad data, and now you're operating off of just totally, like you hear politicians lie, well, they're lying here too. And now you start trying to operate off of lies, and you get things like this, where we're going to enforce this COVID thing on people in their businesses, right here with Corey Mason and Dottie Bowersox in charge. Go ahead, Doc. You can tell your side now.
Well,
Doc believes all this stuff.
Why are you assigning
Go ahead,
thoughts
Doc.
and beliefs to me?
All right, go ahead.
That's a very, very chintzy way to debate a subject.
All right, go ahead.
Now, in terms of people dying from COVID, you say, well, just because they had the COVID in them doesn't mean they died from it. What the statistic gathering is supposed to be, and what they're claiming that it has been, is that if you had some other pre-existing condition and you got COVID, and the COVID took you over the top where you did die, in other words, if you would not have died had you not gotten infected with COVID, then it was attributed to COVID, regardless of whether you had tuberculosis or you had heart disease or whatever. But, I think all of that stuff is really kind of peripheral to the real problem, which you have pointed out is this enforcement that they're going through, where they're actually punishing people for not following the guidelines that have been set forth to deal with this virus. Now, the virus is real. I have talked to people who are actually in the front lines of healthcare in hospitals, and they've told me that this is a very dangerous thing, and it has had a devastating effect on some people. So I don't want people to get the impression that this is just totally fallacious. It's a fantasy. It's not. It's a real issue. But I think there are also problems with how it's being presented to the people of the United States. I think it's a problem with how they're trying to enforce it. I agree with you on that. But I don't want people to get the impression that it's absolutely nothing for anybody to worry about.
Let me know when it's my turn again.
Let me have a turn here.
Jim got turn.
Okay, I'm going to put up a graph. Now, this is off the Racine website, and I'm going to throw it up now. But it's 3,658 confirmed cases, 39 deaths. So my argument here is, I understand the 39 deaths. Here's the thing. Are we going to shut down a whole complete city, business-wise, on a city that struggles in the first place? And also, are you going to, and then come in and enforce this 6-foot distancing and masks and whatever on 39 deaths? Now, I'm not taking anything away from the people that passed away because of it. It's tragic, but the fact is we do die. There is some point in our life where we end up,
The
dead.
death rate in Racine, by the way, is 1 per person.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
So here's the thing. I just think it's an overreaction. I think it's an overplay of the cards by Corey Mason and the whole bureaucracy in the city of Racine. Mount Pleasant doesn't have it. Caledonia doesn't have it. I mean, a lot of these communities outside of the Racine area are not as restrictive as Racine. Why take a community that struggles and lay these burdens on it because you can? That's why. So, I mean, that's my point. I just think it's way over the top.
Here's the thing, accenting that, Jim, way over the top. There's other things that are very dangerous. One of them is driving a car. Now, the likelihood of someone dying from coronavirus that is otherwise totally healthy, has no side issues, is about the same as going out and dying in an automobile accident. That's by the CDC, by their actual statistics. Now, if someone, with all this dying going on with cars and the car accidents, we're not going in and suddenly closing down everybody. Yes, if there's an area where you're having a lot of accidents, you'll get some extra police watching that. You'll get some speed traps set up. You'll make some efforts in a particular part of the city or a particular road or something like that where there's been an excess number of accidents. But you don't just go down and tell everybody you got to stay in your house longer, less trips to the store. We want to cut your mileage down and your gas usage down by 50% because we've had too many accidents. You don't see that type of thing. You don't see that type of overreaction. By the way, with school kids, healthy school kids, the likelihood of dying from this coronavirus is about the same as getting struck by lightning. So all I'm agreeing with Jim is that it's an overreaction what we're doing on this. Let's treat the problem where it's a problem and not pretend like we have to shut down all these businesses because there's suddenly a rise or something because extra people are contacting the virus, particularly as we're going into wintertime. We're heading into the flu season. I mean, what do you think was going to happen?
I thought it was going to go away.
Just
Magically.
That's the biggest joke. Yeah, we're going to make it go away. Can't believe it. Viruses don't work that way,
folks. We're pretty much in agreement. George is a little more passionate about this thing than I am personally. But that's okay. That's why we love
I'm passionate about our freedom is the thing. It's not about the virus. I'm concerned about the way it's being handled. I think it's
I am too.
Too many lies going on. Can't count on what the government's saying. This whole COVID thing and Art, come on. Let's straighten up this police force. Let's get it back in line with people.
Well, let's get back to something that we all totally agree on, and that's our farewell to our friend and companion, Carrie Glenn. So. service over at Wilson Funeral Home. If you knew Carrie and you want to go by and pay your respects, it's from 9 o'clock until 11 o'clock with the funeral, the service thereafter. So that's it for today. And
I'm just going to say one last word. We're going to miss you, Carrie.
yeah, absolutely. So come back and see us next week. We'll be here waiting for you.